she is clicking. She is one of the top long-distance swimmers in the entire country.
Yeah, she sure is. When you talk about the finalists here, only 3 return. Christy Steggy, Kinsey McMahon over there from Alabama, and Lola Mole. Times to beat, though, are key here. Usually the earlier heats, remember this is a final heat. Usually the earlier heats are no problems for this final heat. This time, it's a little different.
Yeah, there were 5 previous heats, and in the last heat, Erica Sullivan, the Olympic silver medalist in the 1500, just swam 15:45.94. Her Texas teammate, Evie Pfeiffer, 15:48.34. We talked about that team race. Texas could get some serious points out of this competition as well. "66 lengths of the pool." So get your fingers, your toes, and every other appendage out. A lot of counting to be done here. The nice thing about seeing Sullivan swim already is that we can compare splits throughout this race.
Yeah, you know, I documented the 500,000, 1,500, the first 3 500s. Erica was out in 4:41. Evie, the senior, was out in 4:45. And then they were pretty consistent all the way through. The good news for this group is they know exactly what they have to do. Not only do you need to win this heat, but you also need to be aware of where you're at when it comes to the clock. And I'm sure the teammates and coaches can help you with that the whole way.
You got the officials helping you count the laps. Almost every swimmer counts up, so starting with 1, and you see the numbers grow. We did see one swimmer during the course of the prelims go with the counting down, and I can't imagine anyone wanting to stare at a 66 and a 64 and a 62 and know how much you have in front of you here. There's a real mental game on top of the physical game when you're swimming a 1650, and it's a rather even start. Steggy just a bit out in front. Caroline Pennington of USC swimming into second. Liberty Williams from a Louisville team that could contend for a top 6 spot in the team standings at the end of the day, in good position in lane 6.
3 freshmen and 2 sophomores, a young field here in this final heat. A lot of great swimming schools. There's Steggy right there of Tennessee. And when you talk about the Volunteers and what they've been able to do, SEC champions. Of course, Steggy was SEC champ not only last year, as you mentioned, but this year as well. Coached by Matt Kretich, who has just done a phenomenal job at Tennessee, both on the women's side especially and the men's side.
149.80 over the first 200 for Steggy, who started her career at East Carolina a couple of years ago, broke the American Athletic Conference record in the 1650. In the first 1650 she raced in her life. Not bad when you're breaking a conference record in your first mile swim. Transferred to Tennessee last year and has won back-to-back SEC championships. Rowdy, she says she's kind of just been a distance natural. She had never even swam a 500 until she got to high school. Her first ever 500 race was swimming under 5 minutes, and again, setting a conference record in the AAC in her first ever 1650.
Looking very consistent right now with these splits. But nobody's really escaped. Obviously, Kristen Steggy out there in front, but you've got, what, 4 swimmers, 2 on either side that are kind of hanging right there with her. 2:46.8, if you're wondering. At the 300 mark, that's about 0.3 of a second slower than Erica Sullivan. But we are very, very early in this race. If you're wondering about Erica Sullivan and her splits, as a freshman, she was 4:41 flat, as I mentioned, the first 500. Then she went up to 4:46. Her third 500 slipped down to 4:51 and change. So she did get slower each 500.
Yeah, at one point she had about a 7-second lead in her heat, but Evie Pfeiffer outsplit her down the stretch and pulled all the way back to within 2.4 seconds to hold second for now, again with 8 top seeds coming in. Steggy still out in front, and then 3 pretty even on this turn. You have Pennington from the University of Southern California. You have Kinsey McMahon from Alabama down in lane 1, who has swam up into a contention for second. And then both Liberty Williams of Louisville in 5 and Paige Mckenna of Wisconsin in 6. Well positioned. Mckenna and McMahon both making a move now on Steggy.
Well, this is a stellar field here. You've got 4 different conference champions alone in this, 2 runners-up, and 2 swimmers that finished 3rd in their conference. So this is a very tough field. As they move along, That's why you don't want to give anything to anyone in this field when you're talking about what they're capable of doing. 413 flat, that's the 450. We'll check the 500 split and see where that lies when it comes to not only Erica Sullivan, but Evie Pfeiffer. You made a good point earlier, Bill, about Texas. That time, or that score at the beginning was a little misleading because Texas is so dominant here and also in the diving. So here we go, 441 flat was the 500 split. They're gonna be right at it. Yep, 441.5, a couple 442s, so they're a little bit slower still than Erica Sullivan. Evie Pfeiffer, if you're wondering, was 445. She finished with a 1548, another solid time.
As Kenzie McMahon, the leader at the 500 mark. Let's bring in the third member of our crew, Elizabeth Beisel, who found out in my research earlier today and surprised her with this knowledge. She at one point actually held the Florida record in the 1650. So we're talking to a former Florida record holder here, Elizabeth. How do you put yourself in the mindset to swim a race like this?
It's hard. You never want to bite off more than you can chew. Typically when I swam the mile, which really wasn't that often, I would look at it as 3 500s and then a 150 race at the end. And so right now these ladies are just starting to settle into their pace. And I love the way that Kenzie McMahon is looking. I spoke to her right before the race and she said, I'm so excited to be in lane 1. Nobody's really going to be able to see me and I can just do my thing. And for her, as a senior, this could be a really special swim. And
so far she is doing her thing. She is out in front. You know, I know you didn't swim this race a ton, but when you did, what does this race feel like? When do you start to feel it, and what does it feel like by the end?
It's absolutely horrible. It's exactly what you think it would be. I've swum a few miles where my feet have actually gone numb just from pushing off the wall so many times. I mean, you have 65 turns in this entire race, and it really is a mental game. All of these athletes here in this heat that you're watching, they've done the work. They know how to do this day in and day out, the thousands of yards they train, but right here in this race, they have to stay so mentally strong while being aware of what everybody else is doing. Like Kenzie McMahon and Paige Mckenna, they see each other right now and they are pushing each other, which is great. It's going to push them to go faster, but it's also really hard mentally.
Paige Mckenna has moved just ahead of Kenzie McMahon, and McKenna touches the wall on this turn at 6:35.20. Just a freshman out of Easton, Pennsylvania for Wisconsin, the Big Ten champ this year in both the 500 and the 1650 free. She's already set the Wisconsin record in this race, the 1650 free, by swimming 15:47.31 at the Big Ten championship.
I love what you said, Elizabeth, about the 500s and attacking each 500, taking them separately, and that's why this record is just so mind-blowing. I mean, we talk about Katie Ledecky in this 15:03. She was 4:36, 4:33 her second 500, 4:34 her third 500. That 4:33 in the middle, Bill, would have won the 500 freestyle at this meet.
Yeah.
Her third 500 would have been second in the 500.
I mean, again, you take an average NCAA championship and you put Katie Ledecky's 15:03 in it, and Rowdy, she ends up lapping the entire field and then swimming an extra length. I mean, she wins those races against the other best swimmers in the country by 75 yards.
And now McKenna is about a second ahead of Erica Sullivan's pace. So she's the only one right now that is ahead of Erica Sullivan. That was the 800-yard mark just a second ago as we go into the 850. I love the way she's looking. Again, I talked about Yuri Sugiyama and what he's been able to do. Speaking of Katie Ledecky, he was Katie Ledecky's coach back in 2012 in London at those London Olympic Games. And I must say that, you know, when you talk about this race and the possibility of winning it in an earlier heat, the only time I can remember, and I've been doing this for 35 years, is back in 1981. I was a senior in college, and that's when Rafael Escalas did it from Heat 1, Lane 1. He won the 1650 way back in 1981, and ironically, he was the competition manager here at the Atlanta Olympics back in 1996.
Wow.
Little piece of useless trivia there, Bill.
I'm going to use that at the next cocktail party, actually. I think that'll work out. McKenna's still out in front, Kenzie McMahon, and as he said, ahead of Sullivan. And again, it is worth noting, as you've talked about, Sullivan's last 500, her slowest 500, her splits were getting slower as the race went along. So McKenna in very good position to beat that 15:45.94 and win an NCAA championship as a freshman.
Right, and now we go into the 1,000-yard mark. This is another kind of checkpoint that Elizabeth was talking about earlier, how she swam she managed that perfect second 500. That's what you want to do. Have that building feeling, exactly what Elizabeth said. At the 1,000 mark, 9:27.9. She's 2 seconds ahead now of that mark.
And she is starting to put a big gap between her and the rest of the field. 40 lengths of the pool behind her, 26 lengths to go. It is Mckenna and then McMahon, but Mckenna has about a half a length lead already on Kenzie McMahon of Alabama, and then there's nobody else really within striking distance.
Oh boy, what a second 500 she put in. She really managed everything so well that first 500, kept her composure, and now the stroke rate starts to increase a little bit, but she's not slipping at all. And Elizabeth, are you a little surprised she jumped on that second 500 so quickly?
A little bit, especially in a mile in a race that is so long. But honestly, looking at the way that she looks right now, maybe she knew that she had this much in her, and her pace in warm-up today felt really good. And that's what a lot of these swimmers will base their race strategy off of, is how is my pace? Am I going to be able to push it a little bit more than I think I can? And my gosh, as a freshman at NCAAs, she has no fear right now. She is absolutely going for it.
And let's add to the fact that she's been dealing with a torn labrum all season. So she had a torn labrum back in the fall, swam through that in December, has continued without missing much time at all this season and putting together a tremendous swim. You know who else is probably feeling pretty good right now? The folks from Texas, because even though it looks like Mckenna is in great position to get the win, we're looking at a possible 2-3 finish here for Texas, which would net them 31 points in the team race, and just like that, hop them ahead of Stanford.
Yeah, and that's what you want to see if you're a Longhorn fan, and we'll talk a lot about Texas a little bit later on. They've got 3 in the top in the 200 butterfly, 3 in the top in the diving, so they're really going to make their mark toward the end of the night. They have a great relay. It's going to be a battle between them and Stanford for second.
And this is also an event where Texas is going to gain some ground on Virginia. Not that they're going to catch Virginia, but no Cavaliers in this final heat. There was one Virginia swimmer in heat 5 of 6. Right now, though, it is Wisconsin and Paige Mckenna hoping to start what could be a big night for the Badgers. They have Phoebe Bacon in her preferred event, the 200-yard backstroke a bit later on as well. Looking to win a couple individual titles on the final night of the NCAA Women's Swimming and Diving Championship. And this freshman is the pace setter, Mckenna. Wow.
He sure is, Bill. I mean, she has just been splendid here this last 800 yards or so. I mean, she is beginning to lap other swimmers. There she is right there. You almost have to pan the camera. And she's also well ahead now of Erica Sullivan and Evie Pfeiffer. But again, the good news is Erica and Evie are running second and third from an earlier heat, time-wise.
And then there's Kenzie McMahon, who's still swimming in second in this heat for Alabama. Virtual 4th place if you compare that first heat. Good swim, though, for McMahon, the Alabama senior, who was also 7th in the 500 earlier on at these championships. Here's Mckenna flipping again. She has put 53 lengths, now 54 lengths behind her, 12 lengths to go.
6 seconds ahead of Erica Sullivan. She's going to win this race unless she falls apart completely here. These last 300 yards, she's going to win the 1650, and as you said, as a freshman.
And we could be talking about a sub-15:40 time for her if she's 6 seconds ahead of that pace from Sullivan. Sullivan finished 15:45.94.
The 10th fastest performer in history is at 15:36. That's Allie McHugh. 10th fastest collegiate performance in history is 15:40. So she certainly has a chance to do that.
Paige Mckenna, again, only a freshman, already has the Wisconsin record in the 1650. She is on her way to absolutely smashing that. 58 lengths behind her, 8 lengths to go. That is 200 yards remaining for Paige Mckenna, well ahead of the pace now of Erica Sullivan.
Yeah, 29 lows here. The last few 50s. She's been really spot on as far as the consistency she's had over the course of this race. And it's a little confusing when you're looking at it, but there she is right there. That's 14:12 right there. She is still way ahead, 7 seconds ahead with 150 yards, 125 yards now going into this wall.
This is just an absolutely dominant swim from the freshman from Wisconsin, Paige Mckenna, who has broken this race wide open. You mentioned it was that second 500-yard stretch where she really jumped on it, pulled away from Kenzie McMahon, and now she's been on her lonesome and smashing the time set by Erica Sullivan as well. This may end up being one of the most impressive races of the entire championship, and we've seen some pretty good ones.
Well, she's definitely getting tired here the last 300 or 400 yards. You can kind of see her stroke, her tempo starting to slow down a little bit, but at this point it doesn't matter. She paid the price early on, or at least in the middle of the race, and now with 50 yards left to go, 15:11, she is way ahead still, 6 seconds ahead of Erica Sullivan.
And just needs to swim about a 34-second final lap. Coming to her final one of 65 turns here. Paige Mckenna, a freshman from Wisconsin, the Big Ten champ in her first season, and now on her way to winning an NCAA championship. What a race from Mckenna as the clock ticks just past 15:40. 15:40.84. Mckenna wins the championship. And Kenzie McMahon comes home in 15:47.60 to take third overall and sandwich in between the two Texans, Sullivan and Pfeiffer.
I think if you're a lip reader, you could see, oh my gosh. That is great.
It's a personal best, it's a new Wisconsin record, and it's an NCAA championship for Paige Mckenna. She scores 20 points for the Badgers. Texas gets second and fourth from Sullivan and Pfeiffer. That gives the Longhorns 32 points out of this 1650.
Yeah, they'll jump right over Stanford now in the total team points. And Wisconsin just doing a great job here. Coach Sugiyana has them on par for a top 20 finish in Atlanta. Beautiful long stroke, hips nice and high, steady kick behind her. Nothing dominant, but everything's just so level in the water. You're just great streamlines off of each wall. And as you can see, lapping a lot of the different swimmers in the field at this point.
You mentioned looking for that top 20 finish. Well, a 20-pointer here from Paige Mckenna is going to do a lot to get them into the top 20. And again, they have a chance to win another championship with Phoebe Bacon coming up in the 200-yard backstroke, which is the next event in the pool. So it could be a great start to day 4 for the Badgers.
Can someone take my stuff?
So let's take a look at the results from the longest race on the card. First, the Heat 6 results, which see Mckenna, McMahon, and Abby McCullough of Georgia, your top 3. You add in the 2 from Texas who swam in heat number 5. So you add in Sullivan and Pfeiffer. Texas takes 2nd and 4th, the top 5 for McCullough. And Virginia with that great swim from Madeline Donahoe in heat number 4 of 6 gets points as well with a 6th place finish. Cavaliers keep building their lead as well. Well, that was a heck of a swim from Paige Mckenna. She's caught her breath a bit, and she's with Elizabeth Beisel.
Paige, national champion as just a freshman. You mouthed, oh my gosh, after you touched the wall. Can you believe it right now?
No, not really. I'm just like, this season has been so up and down for me. Being injured is not very fun, and I thought I wasn't going to even be here. So I'm just so grateful for Wisconsin and just like all my friends, my mom and dad, and my sister, and my grandparents, and oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
When you're coming into a race like the mile, especially in such a stacked heat like that, what is your mindset and what are you telling yourself throughout the entire race, leading start to finish?
Going into it, I'm like, I don't know, I just want to do my best and like have a good rhythm and just focus on my race, and yeah.
Well, you did just that, Paige. Congratulations, national champion.
Thank you so much.
What a swim by a freshman who's been dealing with an injury all season long. She's overcome that injury, and she tames the toughest race in the entire competition. Yeah, believe it, Paige Mckenna, you're a national champion.